Class 11th, Subject Physics, 4th chapter, Laws of Motion. From the chapter, let us see the collision in two dimensions, that is, a non-head-on collision. So, the collision which takes place in two dimensions will be considered as the non-head-on collision. As it is non-head-on collision, the initial velocities and final velocities of the two colliding bodies will not lie along the same line, and therefore let us consider the non-head-on collision between the two bodies having their masses m1 and m2. Now these two bodies are moving with their initial velocities u1 and u2, which makes angles alpha 1 and alpha 2 with this line of impact. Similarly, their final velocities v1 and v2 will make angles beta 1 and beta 2 with the line of impact, and hence we can say that the initial velocities u1 and u2 as well as the final velocities v1 and v2 are not along the same line, that is along the line of impact, but the components of initial velocities and final velocities will lie along this line of impact. Now u1 cos alpha 1, u1 cos alpha 1 and u2 cos alpha 2 will be the components of initial velocities u1 and u2 which will lie along the line of impact. Similarly, u1 sin alpha and u2 sin alpha will be the components of the initial velocities u1 and u2 which will be directed in the upward direction. Similarly, in case of final velocities, v1 cos beta 1 and v2 cos beta 2 will lie along the line of impact, and v1 sin beta 1 and v2 sin beta 2 will act in the vertical direction. And therefore, now if we consider this type of non-head-on collision, then according to the conservation of linear momentum along the line of impact, according to conservation of linear momentum along the line of impact, we can write m1 u1 cos alpha 1 plus m2 u2 cos alpha 2. So this will be the momentum along the line of impact, because u1 cos alpha 1 and u2 cos alpha 2 are the components of initial velocities along the line of impact, and therefore this represents the initial momentum, that is m1 u1 cos alpha 1 plus m2 u2 cos alpha 2 must be equal to final momentum of that system, that is m1 v1 cos beta 1 plus m2 v2 cos beta 2, because v1 cos beta 1 and v2 cos beta 2 are acting along the line of impact. Now, as there is no force along the common tangent, as there is no force along the common tangent for these two bodies, there will be no force here in the vertical direction, that is along this common tangent between the two bodies, and therefore we can write m1 u1 sin alpha 1 must be equal to m1 v1 sin beta 1, that is in this case u1 sin alpha 1 will act in the vertically upward direction and v1 sin beta 1 will act in the vertically downward direction, and therefore the momentum, that is m1 u1 sin alpha 1 must be equal to m1 v1 sin beta 1. Similarly, for second body, m2 u2 sin alpha 2 must be equal to m2 v2 sin beta 2, since again u2 sin alpha 2 will be in the upward direction and v2 sin beta 2 will be in the downward direction, and therefore the momentum will be denoted like this by these two equations. Now for the coefficient of restitution, along the line of impact, so along that line of impact, the coefficient of restitution E will be given as E equal to minus, this will be the relative velocity of separation, that is phi2 cos beta 2 minus phi1 cos beta 1 divided by relative velocity of approach, that is u2 cos alpha 2 minus u1 cos alpha 1. But in this case, if you remove this minus sign, then this term at the denominator will be written as u1 cos alpha 1 minus u2 cos alpha 2, and therefore we will get E equal to v2 cos beta 2 minus v1 cos beta 1 upon u1 cos alpha 1 minus u2 cos alpha 2. This equation will represent the coefficient of restitution E for that non-head-on collision. And now let us see the next point, that is impulse of a force. According to Newton's first law of motion, any unbalanced force changes the linear momentum of the system. We know that according to Newton's first law of motion, if any unbalanced force is acting on the system of colliding bodies, then it will change the linear momentum of the system. Now, according to Newton's second law of motion, if you consider second law of motion, that is rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to applied force and it takes place in the direction of force, we can write the force F is equal to rate of change of momentum, that is dp by dt, or from this change in momentum dp equal to product of force and the time interval dt, that is dp equal to f into dt. So this relation we will get according to Newton's second law of motion. So the change in momentum is termed as the impulse. This change in momentum will be called as the impulse, and if the force is constant and it is acting along the, or it is acting for a finite and measurable time, if we consider the force which is constant and acting for a finite and measurable time interval, then change in momentum in time t will be given as, the change in momentum in time t will be given as momentum is equal to change in momentum, that is impulse equal to change in momentum. So this J will represent impulse equal to change in momentum. Now change in momentum is final momentum minus initial momentum, that is P2 minus P1, that will be given as the product of force and time, that is F into T from this equation. So it will be F into T. Now for a given body of mass m, if that body is having mass m, then for a given body of mass m, the impulse will be given as change in momentum, that is P2 minus P1 will be equal to m into V2 minus V1, m into V2 minus V1, that will be equal to Ft, that is product of force and the time. Now if that force F is not constant, if the force F is not constant, then impulse will be equal to change in momentum. In the previous case, the force was constant and it was acting for the finite and measurable time, but in case of the force which is not constant, at that time impulse will be equal to change in momentum, that will be equal to integration of change in momentum, that will be integration of F into dt, integration of F into dt. So these are the equations for the impulse if the force is constant and time interval is finite or if the force is now not constant throughout, and therefore these equations will represent the impulse, that is the product of force and time. Now let us see what is the necessity of defining impulse. Why we define impulse? What is the reason of defining impulse? That we will have to study. So we know that if the force is constant over a given interval of time, if the force is constant over a given interval of time or it varies with time, then we can conclude and we can calculate the corresponding change in momentum by multiplying the force by time. So if that force is constant or it is varying at that time, in both the cases we can calculate the corresponding change in momentum by taking the product of force and time, that is F into T. On the other hand, in some cases the force acts on the body for extremely small interval of time. For very short interval of time, that force will be acting on that body, and we are unable to measure the force and time interval, which are unable to measure the force and the time interval independently. So independently, if that time interval is very small, then we are unable to measure it. Similarly, as that force is acting for very short interval of time, we are unable to measure that force, and therefore independently both force and time will not be measured properly if that time interval is very small. And hence in these examples we consider the change in momentum due to this force. The change in momentum due to this force will be considered. This change in momentum is then defined as the impulse. So the change in momentum will be defined as the impulse. Now let us consider some of the examples in which we define the impulse. First example is hitting a ball with a bat. So when a ball is hit with a bat, then for a very short interval of time, the bat and the ball will be in contact with each other, and that's why we will have to define the impulse as the change in momentum. Second example, when we give a kick to a football, at that time also for very short interval of time there will be impact between our kick and the football, and hence we will define impulse. Third example, if a nail is hammered with a hammer, then the hammering of nail will take place for very short interval of time, and therefore we will define impulse. Fourth example, the bouncing of a ball from the hard surface. When any ball is struck on a hard surface, it will bounce back, and therefore this bouncing of that ball from the hard surface will take place within very short interval of time, and therefore we will define impulse. So from all these examples we can conclude that in order to find out the impulse, we will have to consider the change in momentum, since that interaction between the two bodies takes place for very short interval of time. And now let us see the rotational analog of a force. The rotational analog of a force, that is the moment of a force or torque. The moment of force or a torque. So in case of linear motion we consider the force, but if there is rotational motion of any body, then we will have to consider the moment of force, or it is also called as the torque. So the moment of force or the torque will be defined as the rotational analog of a force. the rotational analog of a force is nothing but the moment of force or a torque. That is, in case of translational motion, there is displacement of the body due to the force. Similarly, in case of rotational motion of the body, the moment of force or the torque will produce the rotational motion of the body. And then the moment of force or the torque is defined as the product of the magnitude of applied force, the product of the magnitude of applied force and the position vector of the point of application of the force, and the product of, it will be the product of applied force and the position vector of the point of application of the force from the axis of rotation, from the axis of rotation. That is, that torque will be given as tau. Torque is equal to vector r cross vector f. This r will represent the position vector of the point of application of the force r from the axis of rotation, and f will be the applied force, or this torque in magnitude will be given as rf sin theta, rf sin theta, as it is the cross product of r and f. Therefore, torque will be equal to rf sin theta, where theta will be the angle between r and f. So, if you consider the examples, some of the examples in which the moment of force or torque will be considered. While opening the door of any room, we have to apply the torque on it. Similarly, for here the torque is necessary to open that door. Similarly, for opening or closing the lid of any bottle, torque is required. So if you consider the example of the door is fitted with the help of hinges, and therefore if we apply the torque away from the hinges on the door, then that door will be open easily. But if we apply the force near the hinges, then it will be difficult to open that door easily, and therefore this torque will depend upon both r as well as f. That is, the value of r and f will decide the magnitude of the torque. Now let us see some of the consequences. That is, here the consequences, let us see one by one. The first is, if r or f is greater, that is, this position vector of the point of application r or the applied force is greater, then the torque will be greater. So if r or f is large, then at that time the torque necessary will be large. Second, if theta is equal to 90 degree, from this relation rf sin theta, if theta is equal to 90 degree, then torque will be torque maximum, that will be equal to rf, because as theta is equal to 90 degree here, then sin 90 will be equal to 1, and therefore torque will be torque maximum, that is equal to rf. And therefore we can say that maximum torque will be produced there only when the force is applied normally on that object. Then third case, if theta is equal to 0 or 180 degree, then torque will be equal to 0, because sin 0 or sin 180 both will be equal to 0, and therefore torque applied will be equal to 0. And therefore we can say that if the force is applied parallel or anti-parallel to r, then torque will be equal to 0. There will be no torque acting on that body if the applied force is parallel or anti-parallel to the position vector r. Similarly, in the fourth case, we can say that the torque depends on the magnitude and direction of the applied force and the point of action of the force. So we can say that the moment of force or the torque depends on the magnitude and direction of the force and the point where the force acts, that is the point of action of the force. So these are some of the consequences regarding this torque. So when we drive any car or any vehicle, at that time also the torque will be acting on its steering or handles. So this will be regarding the rotational analog of a force or the moment of force or a torque.